Paddy Johnson, welcome to the Sunlight Podcast. I'm so excited that you're here.
Thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. So I'm going to just give a brief intro, and then I want us to just jump right in. Paddy Johnson is an online pioneer with more than 15 years experience working with artists on writing, editing, and grant proposals. As the founder of VVrkshop with 2 V's, an online platform designed to help artists and art world professionals online and off. Johnson brings a history of high-profile projects and writing to her classes. Prior to VVrkshop, she founded the blog Art F City and the public art initiative Parade. She writes for publications like CNN, the New York Times, and New York Magazine. Johnson is best known for her ability to help institutions and artists produce their best work. Paddy, thank you so much for being here. Welcome.
Thank you.
My sort of unofficial bio of Paddy for everybody listening is that I was a fangirl first. Like, you were this distant art critic that I admired, and I was an artist, and I was like, didn't think I ever had an actual hope of meeting you. I would like send you emails occasionally. I don't even know if you know that. But
I don't think I knew about the emails, to be quite honest, but I will say that I was actually, just before I got on the podcast, I was trying to record a reel in response to somebody who was like, how do I contact people who don't accept unsolicited submissions and I have no hope of meeting? And I thought, that's I think that is the framing and the way that many of us feel. So
yeah, well, I'm gonna start. I wrote it down on my list of questions for you because I would like to use my embarrassing situation as an example for you to talk about how you work with people.
Sure.
But then later in life, of course, we got introduced by our mutual friend Philip, and I started writing for you. And oh my God, what I learned in that process is, one, that you're a killer writer and a very dedicated to art and dedicated to good writing and explanation. Like, you would dig in on my pieces in a way that no other editors did. And you just like give a shit in this really deep way that I just admire like crazy. It's one of the things I love about you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So I want to talk to you about all kinds of things. We both serve artists in our work, and I want to talk to you about kind of like some of the problems that you see in artists. And my first thing I want to talk about is just the conservatism of the art world altogether. Like, I have been surprised at how so artists are supposed to be innovative, and they are, right? In our artwork, we are. But what I find so interesting is how then artists don't seem to bring that innovation over onto the business side, or the like how to run their operations side of things. And I find a lot of artists kind of take what's given to them, like you're supposed to work with a gallery, etc. And just as a tax person, when I'm doing people's taxes, when I'm looking at their finances, the ones who are doing great financially tend to be artists who are more creative about how they get their work out there, and not just assuming that their gallery is their ticket to lifetime success. So I'm curious what you have to say about that.
Well, that's actually something that I find inside the program, the program that I run, Netvvrk, which is a membership program for artists. And one of the things that I do find is that a more conservative approach to art making often maps to a more conservative approach to business and what an artist's expectations might be for building their business. And I guess I'm trying to think of like a specific example of how that might play out. Unfortunately, that's not coming to mind immediately, but I do think that there's nothing inherently wrong with being conservative, right? Like, it is important to be safe. And I think a lot of what we want to do is build financial security in some way. And I want to just put out there that the arts is not a great industry to do that in. Like, most of the people that I work with, and I would imagine that this is true for you too, do not make a lot of money off their art. They're not making a living off their art. and I would never promise them that they're going to make a living off their art. Like
Mhm.
a good stipend is considered $1,500 for like usually what is 30 days worth of work. That's crazy. So,
Whoa.
I think when we start to think about like what like pay in the arts looks like, and how we're going to respond to that, sometimes a natural response is to be a little bit more conservative because you feel a little boxed in. um,
Mhm.
and when you feel boxed in, you're not going to you literally don't have the freedom to experiment. And that creates, I think that's one of the driving forces that pushes that is pushing us into what I would say a more conservative moment in the art world right now. I think
Mhm.
another aspect of that is just simply fear. Quite honestly, I think we live in very uncertain times. It
Yeah.
is scary to put yourself out there in this environment, no matter who you are. And it is also, we live in an environment where truth is very slippery. And even I think in circles that are more progressive, it really has become more difficult to find like shared sets of beliefs and truths. And that causes all kinds of problems.
Can you talk more about that, Patty? This is really fascinating, but tell me more.
Well, what specifically do you want to know more about?
Well, this idea of just like not even having a baseline to talk to each other about. So we're talking about conservatism, about just like economic conservatism, and I would love to circle back to that. But now
Yeah.
you've just moved into this like actually it's scary to just put yourself out there and to talk to people because you don't have a shared sense of what is true. Are you talking about like cancel culture or?
I am alluding to cancel culture a little bit. I think
Mhm.
I'm also alluding to even just what the online course world looks like, where there one of the things that I hear from artists more frequently is that there are like a million options out there and you don't really know who's good and who's not good. And
Mm.
I think there are a lot of different approaches to how you make inroads in this industry. And
Mhm.
I think there's also like there are certain things. I think there's a desire for a formula. Like if one thing I do see quite a bit is a kind of desire for like, just tell me what to do so I can do the thing and then be done with it. And
Yeah.
the fact of the matter is that everything we do, that like there may be a formula for it, but you it's got to be fully customized. And so like I guess in a sort of general sense, like those things don't work. Like
Yeah. The
um
formula.
yeah. And so I think I'm like, I think that the answer I am giving you is perhaps a little all over the place. But
There's a lot of issues.
that is exactly I think right.
Yeah.
One of the things that I actually spent a bunch of time talking to artists just about what their problems were. And
Mhm.
I did that because I wanted one to be able to better shape the program that I run. I'm talking to artists all the time, of course, but like I wanted to get like a deeper sense of what the actual problems were. And
Mhm.
it also does kind of help with the development of like how I'm going to speak to artists in public. And when I submitted this to an outside source, just like, what do you think the core problem here is? This particular expert was like, there are too many problems here. There's not one
Oh,
problem.
wow.
Like, they
Oh,
couldn't like, and I think that's something that it really is a difference between the art industry and other industries. There are so many problems that artists face that you can't really narrow it down to one and say, like, this is the one thing that if artists fix this, then everything will follow. The fact of the
Yeah.
matter is that there's I think the art world kind of reflects in somehow a more concentrated way some of the problems that we experience, particularly as it pertains to inequities,
Mhm.
and it magnifies how those problems manifest. So in some ways, the art world is always going to be more conservative because we're dealing the market itself is usually dealing with people who are buying higher end, for lack of a better word, product like art. But
Yeah.
it's really, I think, like you end up seeing problems first here. So
Interesting. Can you give me an example of one of those problems that you see first in the art world?
no, I just said that. I don't know if it's true.
Okay. Okay.
I don't know if it's
I'm
true.
well, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to the formula thing because I think when I was starting out, oh my gosh, and my husband used to give me so much shit for this. I used to think like that I had learned basically a formula that, trust me, this was implicit and not explicit, but I felt that I had learned a formula for how to be an artist, how to go through my career at a high level in graduate school. And the formula was, if you need the context of when I went to art school, 2005 was my graduating year for my MFA.
That was 2001.
Okay. Similar world. But yours was a little more .com-y crashy. So the formula to me was you go and you scope out some galleries that are a decent fit for your work, and you pick one that's like your target, and then you find it, and then you get represented by that gallery, and then you're set, all done. And I, like, 1 year out of graduate school, I managed to become represented by a gallery. And then as soon as that happened, I was like, oh, this is the beginning. Like, I thought this was the end point, Like,
Yeah.
oh, I like, my problems had only just started. And I like one of them, just in a totally practical, I like numbers sometimes because they can clarify things that are fuzzy otherwise, but just from let's look at the numbers behind what it looked like for me in 2005 to be represented by a gallery. That gallery had how many artists in the roster? 20 to 25 different artists. And not all treated equally, let's be clear. But 20 to 25 different artists who are rotating in and out every 2 years, have a solo show, occasionally have group shows. And that supports the owner of the gallery, the two owners of the gallery. That makes a living for them. Now, I'm 1/25th of that. So like, I'm making, in theory, if all the money sort of was earned equally and consistently across all those artists and all those shows, which it's absolutely not, I'd be making 1/25th of the income that these people were. And I was like, oh, so one gallery gives me 1/25th of an income to live off of. Like, that's not going to work. So that was the first. Then you can go deeper into, like, there are the 2 to 3 artists who sell well, and they push those are the ones who get the ad in Art Forum at my time. Times have changed, but that's how it was then. And that they put the money behind and they bring to the big art fair. And my show didn't sell so well, so I'm not going to get an ad. I'm not going to get taken to the art fair. So then we're talking less than 1/25th. Anyway, that was my wake up call right out of the gate, and my formula that didn't work. But that's not a question, just a statement.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah. So I'm curious just about, let's see, we were talking about, like, the conservative, the gallery model, the number of different issues that artists face. So one of the issues is like wanting a formula, but it's hard and it needs to be custom.
Yeah, I think like the conservative, like the conservatism, like I would say that it's mostly caused by just general inequity, right? Like income inequality. A lot of things trickle down from that. And we just, all of these things are kind of heightened. And I guess that's the thing that like, when I say we see things first in the art world, it might not be first, it's just clear. It's like the wages that artists get, what constitutes a middle class, like there's so it's so small in the art world. There's almost no middle class in the art world. And I think like museum boards are a really good place where you see a lot of problems in terms of who gets to make decisions and who has outsized power. Now, of course, sometimes we have museum boards that work just fine, and other times we have museum boards that are really just about status and a lot of that stuff. I think I'm sorry, I have to kind of like work through what this is like while we're talking. So it's not the smoothest conversation I've ever had. But like when I think about like how things work and how things are evaluated, it's not a true evaluation of like, it's not a democratic evaluation of art if a museum board is pushing a lot of things because they're in their collection and that happens to be A, what they like, and B, like they can benefit from having artworks in their collection, in the museum collection financially and having them shown, right? So I think that is a like sort of version of conservatism. Wealthy people just in general tend to be a little bit more conservative, and that I think is something that happens. I mean, there are a lot of reasons for that too. I think it tends to get a little boring once we start to talk about like what people try to like hoard their money and that sort of shit. But like, everything has a relationship to everything else. And I think the big question for artists is, how do you survive in an environment like this? How do you have a sustainable career? How do you have something that makes you happy and like maybe it doesn't pay all your bills, but like you at least feel like you're being compensated fairly for what you're doing? And that's actually a really heavy lift.
Yeah. Do you have, okay, so my perfect answer from you, Paddy, would be, can you solve that for us in one sentence? But
ask for more. Ask for more. It's literally, that is literally the solve. It's not the perfect solve. It's not the perfect solve. It's an incremental betterment of something that is fucked up.
Yeah.
So you can't do it. You can't do it indefinitely, but it is a strategy. And most people, the art world, maybe this is idealistic of me, but I actually don't think so. Like the art world is largely filled with people who want to do good things.
Yeah.
If you ask somebody for $50 more than whatever the thing was that you were getting paid for, like it's not a lot of money, but it would be something that somebody would try to do because it's the right thing to do, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree.
So that's like, I think that is the starting point for everything.
Yeah.
We have to, as a collective, ask for more.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I completely agree with that. And I think when you ask for more, it's more than just for your own benefit, and your own benefit is worth a lot, and that don't feel guilt about that. But it also helps other artists. I mean, it's a collective good thing to do too.
Well, that's exactly it. And that's why I think collectively we do need to be thinking about how we ask for more. That's why I mean, it's a great thing that wage exists and that, we have these standards. They're not enough, but I think
Mhm.
most organizations that I work with are looking to beat the wage standards.
Mhm. Are you talking about Wage, the organization, the
Yeah,
nonprofit?
sorry.
Okay,
For
awesome.
your listeners.
Awesome. I'm
Uh,
going to link to that in the show notes. I'm making a little note.
yeah, so for
Um,
your listeners, Wage is an organization that sets standards based on how much revenue an organization brings in for payment to artists. So if you can get Wage certified, this is something that I think is an accolade for institutions. So if the institution you're working with is not Wage certified, one thing you can do is ask them if they would either work to meet the wage standards, or work, even better, work to get wage certified so that you're always paying the minimum, at least the minimum amount that wage recommends you pay to artists.
that's fantastic. Awesome. Um, I have a really mortifying story about asking for more, not asking for more. I I just like, I sit on two different sides of the desk. Like, I'm an artist and I have an active practice and I have shows, and I, advocate for economic security for artists through Sunlight Tax. Well, so I remember reading this little like blurb of an interview in our local NPR news station on their website, by our arts reporter, talking about how this, the Asheville Art Museum, which is, in this area, it's the flagship like arts institution, in Western North Carolina. And it had just finished this big renovation, and it had this big group show called Appalachia Now. And they had decided, retroactively, it wasn't even their initial policy, I think, but they got called on the fact that they weren't paying any of the artists who were in the show. They decided to contact the artists and offer them each $100. And I was incensed when I read that. I was so aflame and infuriated. Very important to note, I was sitting at my tax desk at the time, and I shot off an email to the writer of the story, our local arts writer. And I was like, this is outrageous. Other institutions look to the Asheville Art Museum to, to set the tone for what's okay to do to artists. And when the big one treats artists this way, there's no hope for anybody. And I was like, this is outrageous. And, from a tax perspective, when artists make too little income from what is genuinely a professional career, they're at risk for audit. And this is like,
Yes.
sets up this whole awful system for artists. And this has to change. This is not okay. Right. I wrote this furious email to him. He like got back to me in an hour, and I was in the downtown like recording studio doing an interview with him within like days. Right. So yay, right? Big awesomeness. And then hilariously, the following week, I, as an artist, was doing an install at the North Carolina Museum of Art over on the other end of this state. And I was in a big group show, very similar to that Appalachia Now show. And I'm like, I'm going there. I have to go spend the night there. I brought a friend to help me do the install because I was painting a big wall, and it was like a massive install. And I realized on the drive over, oh my God, I didn't even ask for payment. I didn't even ask. I assumed they wouldn't pay me. I got a hotel room. I like incurred a lot of expenses, and I didn't even ask. And other friends who had asked did get payment. So I was just like, just the fact that as an artist, I have become so accustomed to this. Like, I did exactly the thing I, from the other, like last week, was so enraged about. So that's my story.
I think this is I mean, this from my experiences running Art F City, which was an artist like centered blog, that when you are used to not making a lot of money, you can forget to do things like ask for it, and B, start to think that it's not even conscious. Like, if somebody were to ask me, are you worth the amount of money that you get paid? Of course I would say no, like, because especially at that time, I was living below the poverty line. Like, I was like not doing well.
Yes.
So, and that was a real challenge for me because I was very visible. People thought I was doing a lot better than I was. And I never let anybody know that I was struggling the way that I was. And it's not like my friends didn't know, of course, that and pretty much if you knew me, you like in any kind of were in any kind of proximity, because there was a lot of anxiety and to never know like how you're going to pay for a hamburger, like let alone like your rent that month, right? Like it's really extraordinarily stressful in all of this in service of being able to launch projects that you care about, but those projects get really compromised when you don't have the income to really support it. And so, you know, I think the things that we do for love are so important, but I think that they can also become compromised when we become unable or I think at a certain point, at least for me, it was like I felt like I was so far inside a hole, I couldn't see the way out of it. So I felt like I really wasn't able to ask for what I needed because what I needed was so much more than what I had, you know? So, and I think that I see that with artists all the time too, right? Where you're selling just enough to make a living, but not really enough to get like, maybe it's put a better way by saying you're making just enough to get by, but not enough to make a living. So everything is month to month. You feel like it's going to break sometime. You've got visibility, so it should break. And probably in any other industry, you'd be totally fine. But in this one, it's really hard. And that's where, you know, I think the things that we offer inside Netvvrk, it's not a panacea for this stuff, but it is like, here's a strategy for how to ask for more. It is a like, here's how you find the person that you need to get the thing that you need.
Yeah.
And in those things, I think are really important because if you don't have a support network, you're really fucked, right?
I totally agree with you. Oh my gosh. I don't think I would be an artist almost 20 years later if it weren't for other artists. It is the sole reason. First of all, it's the reason I still love it. Like, because I really, I love the people. I love other artists. I love being in this community.
Every time I've done like a collaborative art project, like, I mean, in my case, it's usually surrounded with Art F City, it was usually surrounding like benefits and fundraisers or whatever. Like, but anytime I've done any kind of like launched public art or any of those types of projects, like there's nothing more fulfilling than that because I mean, I feel like I'm on the outside a little bit. I'm like, I'm not the actual maker, but like just being in proximity to somebody who comes up with an idea that I think is so funny or fun or amazing. And like, I never would have come up with it. And it's like, I don't know, the artists are so much more interesting than any other type of person I've ever met.
I agree. Yeah. And honest, like really, I think, and you know, they say your strength is often also your weakness. Like, I think that this can cut both ways, but like artists are so authentic, so honest, so warts and all that sometimes like we're, you know, I was joking with a friend who like served something at a lunch to me. And she was like, told me all its flaws before she said it in front of me. And I was like, God, you sound like an artist, like telling me what's wrong with your painting as I look, instead of letting me see what's right with it. But yeah, but it's hard. I think when you're so honest, you can sometimes, like, I've seen this a lot, particularly with young women. Of course, I was one myself. I'm a little bit less than young at this moment, but of like being so incredibly transparent about your needs that you you get underpaid, or you like perpetuate yourself being underpaid. Like, oh, well, I can probably get by with X, even if what I prefer is Y, in terms of like asking for money, like so transparent that you shoot yourself in the foot, as opposed to just kind of saying like, well, I'd really like to
This
get.
is my preference.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I want to mention about this is that it's a lot of the solutions sound like almost stupidly easy. Like a solution for this, like this particular problem of like, how do I ask for what I want, is to practice, right?
Yeah.
And because it's going to be really hard, especially at first, and it gets easier.
Yeah.
For me, it's never gotten easy. It's still hard, but it's a lot easier than it was. And I think when people think about like what it takes to have like the confidence to ask for what you want, I really think that the word confidence, I actually don't like the word, because I think it suggests that we don't have fear. Like if we have confidence, that replaces fear, and we no longer need to like manage that particular demon. Like, no, you work through. Confidence is simply working through that fear.
Yeah.
So you still have it, you still deal with it, but you find means to like do the things that you need to do anyway.
Totally.
And
yeah, I hear that. Feel the fear, do it anyway.
yeah, that's what confidence is.
Yeah. It's not fearlessness. It's not letting
Yeah,
fear
well,
stop
because
you.
I think that's what people think it is. Like confidence is not ever fearing what it means to like speak up or ask for money even when you think you won't get it, like all these things. But it's really, it's really just working through that. So like the outcome looks like confidence, of course, that's what it is, but it's the process itself that that gets you to that point.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I think about this a lot. Like you and I both now are running businesses that support artists in different aspects of their careers. And I think about this now that I'm a business owner, there's so much stuff that I encounter so much more frequently, just because, like even a tax return is a lot less expensive than a painting. And so I have hundreds of tax clients versus there's never been a year of my life I sold 100 paintings, right? It's just much more rare.
Right.
Or, how many museum shows do you get a year? Maybe one per 3 years. I mean, it's like just not happening all the time. So like your opportunities for practice are so much more rare. They also therefore feel so much more fraught, and you don't get the practice that like me as a business owner, when somebody like wants a refund. I literally was talking to Erica Hess on a podcast interview just recently. Like, somebody ever asked me for a refund for a painting, I feel like I would die. But
yeah,
I have had to deal with like create a refund policy, articulate what it is, uphold my standards, make sure the other person is acting in good faith. Like I have so much practice with that now that I don't get that degree of practice as an artist. And that's part of what makes it hard.
that is such a good point. There isn't enough opportunities to get that practice. So of course you're going to struggle with it a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. But I do think kind of where you come in, Paddy, is that having a network I think that's why the network is so particularly important for artists, because you can use other people's touch points it's not practice. Like you don't get to speak to that museum director, but you get to hear what happened when they did, right?
Yeah, We have a lot of that. Those are like that happens on our strategy calls. These are coaching calls basically that we do with the group, and we'll talk about these things. And everything that we talk about is like happens inside what I like to call cone of silence. It's not going anywhere. Because it can't, like, this stuff is really sensitive. But I also see artists practicing with each other. Sometimes like practice can take the form of like, I know I got to send the newsletter out and I don't have anybody to send it to. And so I've got to, and like, why am I even doing this? Because I don't have so many shows. I think you may hear some sirens in the background.
Oh yeah. Oh, city life.
My apologies. I actually have like in my stories that like this morning something that asked a quiz like, what do you like, there's something disturbing my quiet. What is it? Police sirens, ambulance sirens, like or fire trucks, or all three, all four of them. Sorry. Anyway, it's all of them. I happen to live next door to a police station, and a hospital and a fire department.
Ooh, you've got the Holy Trinity.
Anyway, one of the things I was saying about the like newsletters and things like that is like, a lot of people get nervous about sending those out because maybe they don't have the contacts, or maybe they don't have the like they don't have a show or something. So like, why am I even bothering sending this out? And it's like, people still want to hear from you. Like, it's important to tell people what you're doing in your studio. The only touch point for like your place in the, like what you're doing in the studio can't be like when stuff leaves. Like there has to be a kind of ongoing discussion with like your followers, anybody on email about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And that's helpful, not just because you're reaching out to people and they get to know what you're up to, but it helps, like it helps form a connection. It also helps you think about how you want to talk about the work. So the more you do that sort of stuff, like the more you develop your voice and the more your art develops. Like all these things, everything is it's all an ecosystem. So I think a lot of the work is really figuring out like what elements you need to have a balanced ecosystem.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And that practice and that cycle, I think, like, here's my development stage and I can openly talk about that in my newsletter. Here's the like, oh, these are ready to show. Here's the, I don't know, I'm giving an example of how that might go for an artist. And then like, oh my gosh, I got the show, or oh my gosh, the studio visit went well. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. And I think usually it's important also, like in your emails, like talk to people like they're like you would your friends, because your friends are on the other end. Ask them a question. What are you up to? Tell me what you're up to. It's helpful for a couple of reasons. One, whenever somebody responds to your email, there's like a little click in email land that tells some computer like, hey, this person is not sending spam. But it's also helpful because like then you're actually talking to someone. Like the point isn't to just tell people things. The point is to talk to people about things. And I think if we make that distinction, like that we're talking, not telling, we're a lot further along.
Oh my gosh, that's such a good point. And I think honestly, running your art career as well as your business is really, it all works so much better once you recognize that it's still all just relationships.
Yeah.
Like it's not a robot on the other end. It's a human being. Like maybe maybe they're also affected by the news that just came down. Maybe they, like
Yeah.
are harried because they were homeschooling their kids, or like there's also stuff happening in their life. And they also like I think artists, classically younger artists, inexperienced artists, like make the mistake of trying to like ask people to marry them way before they've ever had a first date,
Oh, for
like that's,
sure.
and I feel like once you kind of get like, right, you cannot just like meet a gallerist for the first time and like ask for a solo show. That is bananas, right? You have to like respect the learning process there. It
And I
like
think,
makes it all better. And it like takes a lot of the pressure off of you, the artist too, just like, right, I'm developing a relationship. That's what I'm doing.
like a lot of times like when we think about these relationships, like I think the most extreme example, right, is like, oh, I'm going to meet this like gallerist and ask them for a solo show. But most artists, I think probably that both of us are working with, are not really at that stage. But it can't,
Yeah.
like, they're thinking about things in a slightly more complicated way. But it can boil down to like, I don't know anybody and I don't have any connections. So, and I have like, and that does, and I can't DM someone like and send them unsolicited submissions, so I'm fucked, right? Like I think
Mhm.
that's like the version of, okay, we know we're not supposed to just ask somebody to marry us, so like, so I guess I can't do anything. Like
Yes,
that's where, that's, it took me a little while to get there, but I think that's that's the
totally.
that's that's where I think a lot of artists get stuck. Like I can't do the unsolicited submissions, therefore I'm never going to be able to get ahead anywhere because I live somewhere remote, and like this is just the end of my life, and that's not,
Totally.
and I see why you would, I see why people feel that way. I see why anybody would feel that way. But it
Mhm.
doesn't, but the problem is when you think that way, you're kind of thinking, you're like, you're starting in the middle, not at the beginning, right? Like
Mhm.
you need to build the foundations of a social relationship before you can make even an ask for coffee or anything.
Yeah.
Or like let's say you live in a really remote place and you're stuck because gas prices are high and all the rest, like, maybe you're just asking for a Zoom visit.
Mhm.
Like there's a whole bunch of steps before you get to, can I do a Zoom visit with you? And
Mhm.
some of those steps are like, I don't know, super dumb. Like they're like, I'm gonna send somebody an emoji. Like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna like say you like the show on somebody's Instagram. It's all sort of like bullshit stuff that seems like you're doing nothing, right? And that's also the way often it feels like doing any kind of tedious task. It doesn't mean it's pointless,
Yeah.
right? Like you you have to figure out, like a lot of this work is figuring out what your voice is. Like
Mhm.
so when you're building a foundation, like you can't really fuck it up. You're
Mhm.
just like, you can find out that actually somebody is not a good fit for you because
Yeah.
you said something and they don't respond, or they're like multiple times usually. I mean, I'm this I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm like, I'll harass somebody. I really think they're a good match. I'm
Uh,
like, because I was thinking about this, because this is a while back, the Art of City Rob Pruitt Art Awards and auction, which I ran in 2011, which was a response to the Rob Pruitt Art Awards that ran at the Guggenheim. So this was
uh-huh.
something that we did as a fundraiser. And like, I asked Rob Pruitt a bunch of times to give something to the auction. I can't remember how I found his email address, but I did.
Uh-huh.
I think he had a website at that time. I think that was how. So, you could, and I probably asked them 3 times and never heard anything. But the thing is that he reached out, like, I think a day before the thing happened, and like donated something. And I know, like, basically what had happened is we had gotten enough press because this thing was so absurd, and it kept getting more and more and more absurd as things went on, that there was, when he was first asked, there was no benefit for him
Yeah.
donating something. By the time he got back to me, there was.
Wow. That's so
Right?
cool.
But you can see that was a short time period. I think that happened over the course of a month, but you can see that there's kind of an evolution of a relationship there that starts from nothing and builds.
Yeah.
And everybody, there's a different path for everyone.
Totally.
But it can be done. Anybody can do it.
Absolutely. I have a number of stories like that in my career. Like, well, one, like, and I'll name names because this is such a lovely human being who just should be named. But like George Kinghorn, he was the director. He kind of started, I believe, the Jacksonville Mocha, and my husband's from Jacksonville, so we used to go there a fair amount. So he was like on my list. I had like reached out to him by email a couple times and never heard back. I think it's really important not to get discouraged when a very busy person doesn't get back to you.
Oh, yes.
Like that doesn't mean they think you're terrible, right? It probably means they're really fucking busy.
Yeah.
And like, so I wrote to him, and I did keep him on my mailing list, and I just kind of mailed semi-consistently, right? Like my newsletter. He ended up moving to Maine. He became the director at a museum in Maine, and like many, many permutations, and years went by, right? And I never heard one word from him. I had sent him a couple emails. I sent him postcards when I had a show, like, yes, actual physical postcards. So he was hearing from me for years. A friend of mine was in a group show at the museum in Maine where he had, where he was the director. I went with her to her show. We like had a fun time, went to the party afterwards, and I had the opportunity to meet him in person for the first time ever. I stood there, introduced myself, and he's like, "Oh, Hannah Cole, I've seen your work for many years. It's really nice. I'm going to be in New York next week. Would you like to do a studio visit?" Can you believe that? Like, I had never heard one response from him, but when I was physically in front of him, he was like, "I completely know who you are. And it happens that this like moment for us to connect is going to happen." Also,
I love that story.
Yeah. The coda to that story is that studio visit went so well, I got a solo show at his museum. So like, that was
amazing.
Like really good proof of like, just be consistent, just keep doing it. So
yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious. So Paddy, I really want to talk a little bit more about your program. I want to know, so you were kind of making a distinction about who you serve and who you don't serve. Can I ask you to dig in a little bit more about that? Like, who are you serving and how? Like, what's specific about, I think you would probably say it's a mid-career person, but can you tell me?
Mid-career artist.
Okay.
But of course, mid-career, all of these titles for artists is a like complete minefield, right? So
oh my gosh,
how we identify ourselves is slippery. But the way that I tend to think about it is you're at least a couple years out of grad school. So you're not really fresh. Now, if you have been making work for 20 years and then you went to grad school and you're like 1 year out, you are okay for this program. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like you're 22 and you've skipped through all grad school and you're ready to get out. Like you will find this program overwhelming for you. We have a lot of members who are in academia. We have a lot of members who are working in the commercial gallery art world or working towards that. We have a lot of members who are working in the nonprofit sector and are not necessarily working towards sales, but like different types of commissions and honorariums for their work,
Mhm.
social practice artists, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of different parts of the art world, and we engage a lot of those different parts. It's
Mhm.
really not for people who have blue chip representation. So like if you're already showing at Hauser and Wirth, fantastic. That's great news for you. You do not need Netvvrk. So like
Yeah.
and so that's like I think if you get to that point, that's I think that's where a lot of us would like to be. Um,
Mhm.
but you're going to have different problems. So
Yeah, for sure. And so if I join your program, what do I get? Or I don't mean what do I get technically, but like what is it? What do I get out of it?
you mean like how is my career transformed? Or do you
Yeah.
mean like,
Yeah.
do I get coaching?
How am I transformed is what I'm asking.
Well, really what you get is the ability to get more shows, residencies, and grants. So wherever you are in your career, and people join at different points, right? Like we're going to
Mhm.
take you to that next level. We're going to figure out what it is that is stalling you, because this is
Mhm.
what happens, particularly in mid-career. There are things that stall careers, and we're going to
Yeah.
move you past that block so that you can get to that next level. Now, part of the work that we do is with the artists who join is work on establishing goals, because that's something that I think we probably all think we have, but if we haven't, sometimes we don't choose the right ones. Um,
Mhm.
so we have modules inside the program that are specifically designed to help you figure out like which ones are actually right for you. Um,
Cool.
and we really work with artists to like, it really depends on like what you're looking to kind of do, like how we're going to work with you. So a lot of artists will use the coaching sessions to say develop a particular body of work. Maybe that's
Mhm.
through the studio visits, and then also through some of the asset reviews. And an asset review is say like, let's say you're applying for a grant. I'll take a look at the grant language and see how you can improve the application. We've gotten a lot of people a lot more money because they've gone through the process, not just of me reviewing, but also having feedback from other members who have gotten those grants or just have like good feedback. So we really
Mhm.
do like we have a community that is, in my estimation anyway, very giving. So
Mhm.
if we have information and knowledge that we can share, we do it.
That's awesome. Wow. It sounds so good. It's really exciting. And
Thanks.
will you,
Yeah.
yeah, will you tell me a little bit of like, I'm just curious to like the why behind it. Like, why did you feel called to do this, Patty?
Well, it's funny, like, in a lot of ways I feel like I've been doing this all along. Like Art of City was a very different thing. Um, but because that was a publication, but like the
Mhm.
goal really was to help get artists more visibility for what they were doing. And
Mhm.
I feel like I'm still doing that. But I think the thing that I didn't do in Art of City that I am able to do better here um, is to sort of think about what sustainability looks like too for artists. And so I'm able to, I think, kind of think about um, the career of an artist more holistically.
Mhm.
And when I was doing the work at Art of City and sort of the initial phases of Workshop, I'll tell you a couple things that came up that frustrated me. One of
Yeah.
the things was that with Art of City, I would travel a lot, and with
Mhm.
Workshop, I would meet artists all the time who I thought were really talented. And
Mhm.
one of the things that would happen, oh, this person is so great, like everybody needs to know about them. And then I'd go somewhere else, or, I'd just come back home, or like the course would end and there'd be no way to connect them to anybody else. Draw me up the wall.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is just so important is that we're able to connect with other people who are doing exciting things. And so that was something that had honestly just frustrated me for years. And
Yeah.
so, and the other thing was that I found when I was working at VVrkshop, like, the class would end, but the need for support didn't. Because, you know, the the thing is, and we do this too, like we give you the skills so that you can replicate this um
Hmm.
in different scenarios, but like your problems are always changing. The art world is always changing, and people need support that is going to change and evolve. So
Yeah.
I felt like fundamentally the courses I was offering were, I mean, I think they were really good courses, but I think they didn't solve a core problem, which is that artists need ongoing support. They don't just need one-off solutions. And I feel like the
Mm.
nonprofit world is really good at offering these like one-off things, like boot camps and like workshops and things like that,
Mhm.
things that don't offer the kind of sustained support that an artist needs. The reason that an artist gets a gallery is because the gallery gives them sustained support when they like, in terms of like sales support and shows and that sort of thing. This is of course best case scenario. We all know that not all galleries are perfect.
Yeah.
All the rest, but
Yeah.
like this is at least in theory. But if you're
Mhm.
unrepresented, you're doing a lot of that work yourself. And so I think a lot of the questions that I have is like, how can I offload, like unburden people with some of this stuff? How can I make it easier for them? So like,
Yeah.
one of the things that if you take the webinar that I have, we have something, it's called like the 24-hour fix. It's called the fix actually. And what it is are like 5 things that you can do within 24 hours that will that will help, right? Because
Oh my God,
like,
that's incredible. I love that.
and like the reason that exists is because like, I like after several years of doing this, I'm like, oh, I know the things that people can do really quickly that
Yeah.
they probably haven't done.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of like little things that are low hanging fruit that like that I've seen in the membership that people do it, and it's like within, a couple weeks they've got sales or they've got something that they didn't have before. So
Wow.
so those are things that I think like, if I can just get that to people, to artists who need it, then
Mhm.
you get like a little kickstart. So
That's beautiful. That's fantastic. So in the show notes, we're going to have the link. If people are interested, I mean, this sounds so amazing to me. I'm like, what are those 5 things I can do in 24 hours? I want it right now. But you can look in the show notes and you can click the link and go, check out, that training and, check out the Netvvrk program.
Netvvrk, yes.
Yeah. Is there anything that you want to say before we end, Patty?
I don't think so. I would like to say just thank you for having me on, and like also just thanks for being such a good friend over the years. Like I think we've known each other for a really long time. It's really fun to come on this podcast as you just started to chat with you about what I'm doing, and a little bit we haven't talked so much about like the tax problems that people have, but I do want to just stick in here that like a lot of the a lot of the things that I know about taxation, a lot of the things that have really helped me become like just manage my money better and like manage what I'm doing better, they've really come because they've been a direct result of our relationship. And I want people to know that, because like, you're incredibly generous, but you're also incredibly smart, and like, you give good guidance to people. It can really be transformative. And I don't think that I would be doing my job properly if I didn't spend these last couple of minutes telling people how amazing you are.
Oh, Patty. Thank you. I appreciate that so much. It's mutual. If you're listening to this, what you don't know is that I've recently had the pleasure of having some business therapy with Patty, where we have these like epic 2-hour phone calls where we go through all the issues, like all the stuff we're dealing with. And yeah, I feel a kindred spirit in you, Patty, because you just like deeply, deeply give a shit. And you have a really amazing brain and you're working on it. Like, well, how can we make this better? What are the systemic problems? How can an individual benefit? And I love that. So
it's like, you kind of wish the work didn't have to be done on such a deep level, but it's actually, I can't think of a more rewarding thing to do, because art does make the lives of everybody better. So if there's more of it and people are better taken care of, like, we're gonna benefit as a culture as a whole for that. So
I so agree with that. Yes. And I think that having a network of people around you to support you and to learn from and to have those different data points it just can't be overstated how valuable that is. And I just also love your sort of I love how you're thinking of systemic problems and how the individual problem relates to it. And like both of us, I think, have this message of like, let's also raise the standards across the board, like for everybody.
Yeah.
And I think that's important because art needs to exist. We need it in our life and it makes the world better.
I know
So.
it sounds like cliche or cheesy or something, but it's actually true. Like, that's the thing. Like, if you take that thought to its most natural conclusion, it always works out to be true for me. So
Same. Absolutely. People made art during the Holocaust. I mean, like art has been a thing people turn to in the darkest moments, also in the most wondrous moments. I mean, it's just like, it's an expression of what it is to be a human. And I think in the best way. So art is often where I feel proud to be a human again.
Yes.
The New York Times makes me feel not proud to be a human. And then art makes me feel good again. So
likewise.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Patty, thank you so much. Thanks for the amazing work that you do just generally in the world. Thanks for being my friend. And thanks for coming on to the podcast today. It's been a delight.